Welcome to the Liberty North Show, where we watch the modern fifth generation battlefield with the eye of Canadian insight. And today we have Dan from the Lakeshore Sovereign Assembly with us to get into the weeds of, well, really the global war that we're in, but how it ties to, a lot the legal situation in Canada and a lot of the structures that I think maybe have struggled with corruption from their origins or have become corrupted since early on. But I think there's going to be a lot of deep dives today. So welcome to the show, Dan. We're glad to have an opportunity to unpack your experience and your research and your offerings.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you guys having me on here and getting an opportunity to let people know a little bit about what's really going on and potentially what they can do about it.
Right. That's one of the things that people throughout this whole thing have been saying is we see the corruption, we see there's, but what do we do about it? We're all individuals. So as we spoke, so you're a Torontonian like Simon over here. I'm in the French part of Canada in Montreal. But so can you go through to start, I guess, your experience to how you get to being Dan at the Lakeshore Sovereign Assembly, who's speaking out and who's actually going through the motions and bringing the court cases and taking action? How do you get from just individual citizen Dan to we're doing this?
Sure, no problem. I'll try and be as concise as possible on this, but one of the things I always end up saying is that it's all available on the website. So if there's anything that I say that feels like it requires a more detailed explanation, or somebody wants to look into it a little bit more, everything is cataloged, usually by video, if not by text and by writing. But anything that I say has been documented, can be researched. We've got it all available on two different websites. One is www.tngalliance.com. That stands for True North Guardians Alliance, but it's tngalliance.com. And then if you look at the how-to section, it's basically everything that we've done and everything that you or one could do should they so choose. The top one right now is the Stop Funding Crime, aka paying taxes and letting people know now with everything. I mean, it was the same before when we talked about it in 2020, but with everything that's come out, the idea being the law, not an opinion. The law is very clear. Should you choose to fund this stuff, you become personally liable according to the Criminal Code of Canada and the Rome Statutes and various other international covenants and treaties. Good news is that you don't actually have to do this stuff, and the law also protects you from that liability and actually empowers you to be able to do something about it. But the other website would be lakeshore.sovereignassembly.com. Everything that we've done is on there, including the citizens' arrests of mayors, police chief of Halton, a couple of MPs, and various court case actions, notices of dishonor we've sent, et cetera, et cetera. So everything started in August 2020. I hooked up with a group there called Hugs Over Masks. I was one of the national leaders for that for a time. Time went by when we wanted to do the citizens' arrests. Three of us eventually co-founded Stand for Thee, and then Stand for Thee did some of the citizens' arrests. We talked a lot about common law and how law is actually supposed to look. We did Zoom meetings, we did in-person meetings, whole bunch of things. But the common thread throughout both of those was always local action for national impact. The idea being, rather than congregating in an Ottawa or even Toronto or wherever it may be, take care of your home. Gather a bunch of people at home, strengthen your community, whether it's homeschooling. That was one of the, besides citizens' arrest, we always talked about exiting the system. That included homeschooling. We brought teachers together. We empowered parents with knowledge and information of one of the how-to sections is exit school system. So we gave them, curriculums, and whatever it may be. But even in the in-person meetings, we always said your child would be safer even just completely not schooling rather than being in a school system. So we did
It's the
those kinds of
Rockefeller
actions.
indoctrination system. The schooling system just doesn't, it's not what it is, it's a misnomer now.
Of course it is. Absolutely correct. And I know that you guys are both, big advocates on that one and doing a lot of work on that front. So that's, it was always children first. Even when we did citizens arrest, the whole concept was get the parents to file police reports in defense of their children. Talk to the police about protecting the children. Action the citizens arrests regarding protecting the children. This was before vaccines or anything like that. This was just lockdowns and masks. But everything had a process. Everything had a proper by the book route to go. Initially, it was to give the police an opportunity to fulfill their oath, to do their duty, and protect the individuals that they are supposed to protect, because they're people too. Well, we're here now, rather than stand for the True North Guardians and Lakeshore Sovereign Assembly. And again, same concepts: local action, national impact, focus on co-creating the world that we want to live in, while also tackling the threat head on. It's don't get me wrong, creating in the background and having the alternative solution is really, really good. But there are children at risk here. We can't really sit back in the private and, it's free will and choice. Everybody can do exactly what they want. However, for those of us that choose to take an action, the thinking behind it is we have a lawful, moral, spiritual, whatever duty to protect one another, and especially to protect the children. You're not going to do that by ignoring the problem. You've got to kind of face it head on. And that's going to accelerate the process in manifesting that world that we want to live in. So that's how we've come to where we are now. And again, the details are on the website.
So, we're looking at then like a number of different moving parts. There's the idea of, to an extent, being in the system that we're in and fighting back within it. But then there's also paths that you've explored in terms of exiting certain parts of the system, or, ending certain contracts with the government or the state that don't have the validity or the power that people believe they do. So there's those two kind of things. I think the thing that intimidates people the most is the idea that you can exit certain agreements with the government that people believe to be binding from birth till death. And then the other part is the sort of fighting back within the system. Now we've seen, I think we should make our way to the most intimidating thing. Maybe let's earn that, because I know that that's where people struggle the most. And I know that it's taken me years to really get comfortable with some of those ideas. So why don't we just first start with some of the battles within, within the system itself, I guess I would say. For example, you talked about citizens' arrests of, certain officials. Can you give us an example of one of those, and the sort of from A to B, and what the intended impact was and what your experienced impact was?
Absolutely. So I'll actually start with the intended impact, because ultimately the intention governs the attention. And in the beginning, when there was harm, we knew there was crime, we knew that laws were being violated, we knew all these things. What people didn't really know is that there were avenues that we had that we could actually take action. And this is where, like I don't want to necessarily talk and focus on folks that I'd learned from, but they've been dealing with this agenda since the mid 80s, right? So they had some skin in the game for quite a long time, challenged it up to the Supreme Court in some cases, and including taking the CRA to the Supreme Court. So, there are folks from all around the world that
the CRA is what?
Canada Revenue Agency, taxes, right? And basically using international covenants and treaties, the right to self-determination, and the fact that we're dealing with a business rather than an actual lawful government entity.
It's
But-
truly a
and-
mafia, right? It's a mafia and mob structure, really. It's a police state, and you have a monopoly on force.
Yes.
I mean, Canada is a lot worse than the US in this perspective, from what I understand. Quebec,
It is.
Canada,
In
they
the US,
control all force, right?
well, yeah, and in addition, like it's better and worse both at the same time. The US has something called constitutional sheriffs, and they actually have authority over the corporate police, which are the more traditional ones that you see. Well, I shouldn't say traditional, the more common ones that you see. But over in Canada, if we actually choose to activate it, even within our own jurisdiction, and this is another thing that people can look up, Criminal Code of Canada, Section 15. The law actually is obedience to de facto. That's Section 15 of the Criminal Code. De facto means acting as legitimate, but not actually legitimate. Well, it's very, very easy to prove that the government of Canada and the structure that we live in is a de facto government, does not have any legal or lawful force or effect. Therefore, even within their own criminal code, we actually have the power to stand up against them. Officer Thunk and Clunk are going to do whatever they're going to do. But again, like the letter of the law, the pen being mightier than the sword, we actually do have the truth and the law on our side. But the original intent of the citizen's arrest was to get individuals in the mindset of defending themselves, right? I'm a martial artist by trade, and the idea being getting people to defend themselves. It's easy to teach people, punches come into the head, block, punch, kick, strike, whatever, right? That kind of thing. It's much more difficult to teach people that they are worthy of defending. You have the right and responsibility to defend yourselves, let alone parents who have that additional responsibility of, you have this spiritual and lawful responsibility to also defend your children. So that's where we kind of started with the citizen's arrest, but not just going up and saying, "You're under arrest, you son of a gun." We really wanted to make sure that everything was above board and to the letter.
Kosher.
Kosher.
But actually
And
within the law. Yes, I got
yeah,
you.
and when we first did the citizen's arrests, we used the Criminal Code of Canada. We had parents file police reports in defense of their children using the Criminal Code of Canada. We had a massive binder of evidence. This binder of evidence and process was vetted by 2 different lawyers, 3 paralegals, and multiple police officers from Police on Guard. Any other time, they're all like, this would be a slam dunk. This would be a piece of cake. We made the process available to everyone because, again, we don't want to hoard the knowledge. The idea is throw it out there and give people a step by step, but then you got to do it yourself. So we first contacted the police, then we contacted what's called the Police Services Board, which is the governing board of the public that is supposed to dictate the policies of the police. So it's like, who does the chief of police report to? Answer: the Police Services Board. And this is pretty much every region in all of Canada, with a couple of exceptions. But when we were filing the police report on the mayor, because nobody's supposed to be above the law, and here it is, we co-wrote the police report, myself and the lawyers and the paralegals. We wrote that letter together. So again, like, this was a proper police report with proper evidence, proper Criminal Code of Canada, also potentially simultaneously under common law, because living men and women were doing it as well. So we were covering all bases of law, and the police chose not to act. Giant shocker, right? when the police, and then the police services board as well, chose not to act, then what we did was said, well, if you don't do it, then by law, we have to do it. So we're going to read the declaration, and then under section 494, bracket 2 of the Criminal Code of Canada, defense of property, children of the property of the parents, under their jurisdiction, the police are supposed to come and assist us with that arrest. So the original intent was to get people to grasp that knowledge that they have the authority, ability, and right and responsibility to defend themselves and their families, and to get people into that mentality of, we're not just going to take a sign and go, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, please don't do it to us, because that's the other side of it. When you say in a protest, by its nature, stop doing this to me, you've already given away your power, because you are telling them that they have the power to stop or go. It's like going to you mentioned the mafia. It's like going to the Don of the mafia and being like, hey, can you stop breaking my windows? Like, can you stop, busting my kneecaps or something like that? Like, you've already signed away your power on that one, spiritually even. So the idea being, we are in charge. That is a criminal. We are calling it out. And then you folks can do or do not. In addition to that, you also test the system.
Yeah.
Because this is where people are like, oh, you got to take them to court. You got to use the police. And then we kind of went, okay, here's the law. Here are the lawyers. Here are the paralegals. Here's police on guard. By the way, each of the 7 citizens arrests that we did ask directly to the people that were kind of running police on guard, sometimes in person. Hey, like you took an oath too. We're doing the thing. Do you want to come?
Like, this person is a criminal, right? So let's say you see it in action. It's a little more abstract. If you see something in action, this person is robbing this store. This person is a criminal. You have a duty to either perform a citizen's arrest or have the cops intervene. It's a little more abstract, and because it's more intellectual, they're able to skate around it, especially with the media, right?
Yes and no. And we were very careful with this regarding the and interestingly, like, it is all on the website, right? Like, the process, the exact code that we use, binder of evidence, all of that. We have it all down. Because of the harms, like let me give an example, right? Lockdowns, right? That's freedom of movement. That's child abandonment. That's bodily harm. That's a whole bunch of other things in there, right? So those are direct criminal codes, and there is a crime in progress. But in addition to that, the Criminal Code of Canada used to be Section 494, and that was just the citizen's arrest and self-defense. However, what you said there of, like, oh, well, it's not, I mean, it is a crime in progress, but you could make that argument, right? Okay, it's not a crime in progress, no problem.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying it's more abstract to the cop, right?
Right.
The cop is like, okay, well, how do I judge this situation?
And with the police reports that we were doing and the evidence and everything, and even the declaration that we read, it was pretty clear that,
for the record, I agree with you. I'm just
trying
to
do. I know you do, right?
How to change the mind of people, or how to, and this is what you're doing is raising this awareness that, you're responsible for yourself. Self-governance means something. It's not this thing that we have now. We're not in a system of self-governance. But sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a really good point there, right? But ultimately, this is the other side to it as well. When let's say there's some good guys, and let's say they're helping out, and let's say they're things end up going like a Nuremberg 2 kind of thing. There's going to be an accounting for every individual, and at some point, we have to show, even if you get into, I'm jumping a little ahead right now, but even if you get into the Geneva Convention and the Law of War Manual, it very clearly states that our job is to, I'm quoting from the Law of War Manual here, exhaust all alternative means of a peaceful cessation of hostilities. So we have to do everything within our means. Protests are included in that. Citizens' arrests are included in that. Writing letters are included. Like, everything is included there. We have to exhaust all peaceful alternatives before the military can step in. But that's kind of jumping ahead there. But we've certainly, at this juncture, exhausted all peaceful alternatives. But again, going back to the local action, national impact, that was the whole concept behind it. But one of the things that I still, let alone back then, kept hearing was, we need more people, we need more people, we need more people. Again, martial arts perspective. You don't wait for other people to do it, to do the thing that is necessary and
right,
one's
and just.
duty. You know what I mean? Like, you do the thing, and then should other people be inspired, hopefully, then they can choose to do it themselves. But you don't kind of wait, because what's the old saying? On the bones of 1,000 lost souls lie across the battlefield, for those who hesitated. Right? It's just, we just go ahead and we do the thing, and we stand on the pillars of principle. So that was the original purpose of the citizens' arrest. Did anybody walk away in chains? No,
That's what
obviously.
I was going to ask.
Right?
So how does this play out? How does the final step play out? You make a declaration. You're in public. What's the actual tangible? What happens?
Well,
in this case, what should happen? Not what should happen.
Okay.
What happened?
What happened?
What did happen? Yes.
Well, let me give a juxtaposition here, right? Because the answer is nothing. One of them, they tried to give us some fines, and I don't even think it was us. I'm pretty sure it was just me. But I sent them paperwork. That's it. I sent them evidence, paperwork, not a dime, not a court case, because again, no jurisdiction, right? Everything was proper there, but ultimately, nothing happened with any of that. Now, that also being said, nothing happened to us. There were other people that didn't follow a process. They just kind of went in there and said, "You're under arrest, you son of a gun." And stuff did happen to them. So the spirit behind what we were doing and our conviction, let's say, there was quite a bit of protection and assistance with that. Because the police, the judiciary, and all chose to do nothing. And we even have, through Freedom of Information requests, where we had the staff sergeant of child abuse and sexual assault, actually, like, her in Halton, her name's Crystal Kelly. So we actually had correspondence with her. So she got the police reports. So the police received reports and did nothing. That's not just obstruction of justice. That's criminal negligence. Quite literally, every single police officer, RCMP and OPP, that we sent this stuff to, and it wasn't just the citizens' arrest. There was so much more evidence, and common law tribunals with rulings and their evidence, and we've just been hammering them nonstop for the last 4 years. Every single one of these people is guilty of criminal negligence, obstruction of justice, bodily harm, and being complicit to murder, domestic terrorism, and everything else in the, without exaggeration, thousands of pages of just Criminal Code of Canada evidence that we've compiled. they're all guilty. And that becomes part of the evidence there, where we show we have tested the system. Later on, we tested the judiciary all the way up to a regional senior justice. We've tested these things. The system is corrupt, captured, and broken. According to the Law of War Manual, section 11.10.1, and a few things in there, if the judiciary is captured or corrupt, unwilling or unable to perform their duties, the military has the authority to suspend ordinary courts. So that's another thing where, because we've tested the system, and there's contact your MPPs and run for Halton District School Board trustee, right? Like we have tested the system from within on basically every level along the way. There's no hope.
It's awesome.
It's captured, it's corrupt, it's all of these things.
So, but this is an important point, like on a number of levels, because on the one hand, you're making it clear that to advance, our pushback as citizens to a certain level, we have to have taken responsibility for all the steps to prove the level of corruption we're claiming exists.
Right.
And if we're looking at this from like the perspective of fifth generation warfare, you have very subversive forms of warfare at play. We're saying, okay, well, there's a form of ideological subversion. So the cognition of our public servants has been influenced to the point that they are not able to serve in the capacity that they're supposed to as public servants. So seems like a big part of what you're sort of establishing with everything you guys done is, okay, we have a claim that we're in this sort of fifth generation war. And that part of it is that our highest levels of public service have been completely corrupted by these forms of, psychological warfare, arguably. But now we have, all the attempts that you've made through all the different avenues. And so is it your opinion then that you have established that the system has been completely subverted and is therefore basically unlawful itself on this large scale?
Absolutely.
And illegitimate as well. Is that also part of it?
Yes, a huge part of it. And thank you for mentioning that. It's a huge part of it. And this is where, even as we were performing these actions, our main thing was to go to the police, because again, even under their corporate jurisdiction, they do have the authority and responsibility and duty to act as officers of the common law. So every officer, doesn't matter where across Canada, they do have the authority and responsibility to defend living men and women, and living sons and daughters as well.
Can you differentiate, sorry, quickly, common law versus civil law? So when you're saying common law, so
I'll be as brief as possible. Yeah. So okay, when you say the word legal, you are referring to law of the sea, maritime law, and that's what, or admiralty law in some cases. That's what we see when we're dealing with these corporations, right? We're dealing with businesses, we're dealing with corporations. You really have to do whatever you want to do, but you could look into the fraud of the birth certificate. And when you deal with the positive entities that have been assisting us along the way, like that was their first thing, is, well, how do we kind of reclaim what was ours the entire time? And they all said, start with the birth certificate.
It's so true. There's these things we don't even question. Just,
I know
you need, of course, but the government has to certify that you're born. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no. That's a great question, right?
We don't think about these things,
and people don't, right? But because you, especially the older generations, right? You trust. But the point being, baby's born, you get a certificate of live birth from the hospital. That's the living baby right there. Then the government comes along and says, okay, you need a birth certificate. Then the name switches from an uppercase, lowercase to an all capitals name. If you go on a legal document, only corporations are all capitals. If you look up the legal definition of person, a person is not just a man or a woman. It can also be a corporation, an entity, an LLP, on and on and on and on the list goes, right? So the corporation of the government of Canada, province of Ontario, Supreme Court of Canada, Superior Court, like, it doesn't matter, right? They are dealing with the legal fiction that was created on your birth certificate. That birth certificate is monetized, bonded, securitized, and traded on the open market. I have seen where my QSIP number goes and what funds they are being traded in. And then they do it from passport, driver's license, health card, like you name it. They are making money off of it. We all hear about the national debt. There is a national credit that's specifically tied to the human resources that are us, right? So that's, but again, it's all the fictional money. You
Quickly,
look into.
can I run something by, or just like clarification? So the way I've put or seen it is our debt is only possible because the human capital, which is kind of what you're talking about, we are leveraged by the government, let's say, for the debt. Is that something along those lines?
You would have to go back even further. I think House Joint Resolution Act, I think it was July 1933 or early 1930s, 33, 31, something like that. We've all got this available on the TNG Alliance website and in the how-to section, and it's actually how to birth certificate remedy. There is a ton of information to unpack there, because then there's laws and acronym: land, air, water, right? And then water is the maritime law, land is the common law. But even then, oh my goodness, the amount of like arguing that people do over this kind of stuff, and really brilliant people who've studied this stuff for decades. But if I can kind of summarize it, because there's truth, right? Summarize it down to a point of truth. Lots of people have found success doing multiple methods, right? What seems to be the common denominator of success, whatever avenue you take, is the spirit and conviction of the individual. So people get to a point with a lot of this stuff, and then they hit a wall, right? And in spirituality, that's your test of fire, right? Martial arts, same kind of thing. You hit a wall, and what you do with that wall or that ceiling or whatever you want to call it, that's going to determine what's happening next. If you break on through to the other side, then that's where you find that next level. If you hit the ceiling, what actually happens with a lot of people is they go backwards, right? Martial artist, so I will use the board breaking analogy. When you're teaching somebody to break a board, it's really like, it's not that hard. I've had a 5-year-old, I think the youngest one, I've seen a 4-year-old break a board, right? With the stomp on the foot. You don't want to mess up their little hands, right? But what happens with an adult that can't break a board is they stop here, when really you want to actually go through the board. Your target is over here. So when you go like this, that's where the pain comes in. When you go like this, that's your success, right? And the thing that's stopping you here is fear. False evidence appearing real, right? It's not that hard to break through the board, but once you do it, that's where your next stage of growth is. So the point being,
I really like that acronym.
Well, I've got good teachers, right? But the point being, when it comes to this stuff, I've seen people do it full on King James Bible, and they're like, no, this is the truth, this is it, da 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 da. It's not the approach that we take. But I've seen people have some really incredible successes, even in family court, with this kind of stuff. No, Like this, like you guys are lying, you guys are criminals. I am a living man, I am a living woman. That, like, you know, my way is Jesus. Sure, do your thing. I've seen people go in with what's called the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC law. You're a business. You don't have a contract. I've claimed my birth certificate under this. Here's my proper paperwork. Da 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 da. And then just sticking with that truth. It's the ones that, you know, get bothered and then go backwards. That's not a judgment. I'm just telling you what I've seen through observation, right? So there isn't a magic bullet approach or a silver bullet approach to any of this stuff. The determining factor of success is the conviction and the spiritual chutzpah of the individuals that are making the attempt, not making the attempt, that are performing the action, right? We have a third dimensional body to perform an action, right? Everything else, this stuff is already done. But here we have this to do a thing. So that's kind of where we come from on that.
Like that, and this seems to really tie deeply into, you know, one of the more official definitions of war, which is two irreconcilable wills trying to impose themselves on each other, right? And so you're really looking at the will of the individual and the will of this state, this corporate entity, whatever you want to look. And it really is. It's just these two irreconcilable wills. And are you going to refine your will to the extent that you move towards the freedom that you are focused upon? So, and that makes a lot of sense. I think you're right that a lot of people are intimidated by the process of this, sometimes in ways that are maybe just mental, where they've just created mental obstacles and believe that it's much more harder and complicated than it is. But other times, perhaps they have not refined their will to step up against the will of the state. I think that's sometimes the case too, where you have to be in a certain position in your life and in yourself to really follow through on these actions. But let's get, like, maybe we could get a little more specific here. So, for example, you gave the example of remedying your birth certificate.
Yep.
So why don't we just focus in on that and give people a real practical story or example here of like what that means and what the other side, you know, what happened when you got to the other side of that.
Yeah. So, you know what? It actually ties in really nicely to the court case that not just myself, that several of us are going through, and the attack that the judiciary and the police have done on us, and where that's going to go. And of course, it all ties in with the birth certificate and the remedy of that, right? So there is more than one way to do it. We have maybe 1.5 ways on the website, but it is far from the only approach, right? Essentially, what you are doing is you are taking that corporate fiction that was created and is yours, right? Like it's all based on you, the human individual. So the idea is like, hey, that's mine. And then you file the proper paperwork and statements to be like, oh, hey, like I'm alive. I'm not a corporation. You can do UCC1 financial statements to claim ownership. There's that ship again, right? Like you guys are both well aware of like the code within language, right? And how, but you can take ownership of that birth certificate, create a copyright on it, right? To own the property, different forms, right? And then you send them all out there. And then the basic idea is if they remain unrebutted and uncontested for 30 days, you have yourself a proper claim right there. In law and in commerce, if something remains unrebutted, it stands as truth in law and commerce. So the short version is whatever paperwork you're doing, you're throwing it out there and gathering proof and evidence that nobody has rebutted your claim. Therefore, you have truth at that point.
So
And
who are you
they
sending that
rebut
to?
you. Pardon me?
Like what entities would you send that to So let's say, okay, you've made the claim on because you're this corporation under their eyes. You say, no, that's mine. I'm claiming ownership over that.
Yep.
Who do you send that to? Or who did you send that to? Who did not respond? Who did not rebut what you were saying?
So again, there is more than one answer to that question, but I'll save some of the ones that we did, right? So we did like our local police, OPP, RCMP, government, local MP, UN, the like Windsor Castle. Like we literally did like a whole bunch of these things. The Supreme Court, Superior Court, and then one of the only responses that I got was actually from the Supreme Court. And they were just like, hey, we got your stuff. We can't help you. We didn't even respond to that because we're like, we didn't ask for help. We're notifying you. Thank you for thank you for acknowledging that you've been notified.
Yeah.
So now I actually have a letter from the Supreme Court of Canada.
You've been served, Supreme Court.
We got your stuff, and we're not rebutting it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So
okay.
And then of course we sent that to the CRA as well, right? And then several of us, not just one of us, because it's not just me. Several of us got letters from the CRA being like, hey, here's our, and like every single one of us got basically the exact same letter. And it was basically like, hey, here's the Income Tax Act. You have to pay. So what happens in this stuff is you respond. You don't just leave it and go, oh dear, right? Like you have to defend yourself and rebut. Because as much as you're looking for a rebuttal, if they send you one, you respond to it. And the last person that leaves the battlefield wins. So we responded to the follow-up from the CRA, and we were the last ones to leave the battlefield.
What was your response to them?
To summarize, here are the facts, here's the law, here are the covenants and treaties. They are still active in Canada. P.S. You guys are committing crime, genocide, domestic terrorism, and everything like that. Here's about 1,000 pages of criminal code evidence. Are you enticing me into indebted servitude? If so, please respond under penalty of perjury.
Right. And so their non-response is
a response.
How long ago was this for you?
Oh, like 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So since then, what is your situation in terms of taxes?
In terms of what?
Taxes.
I haven't heard of this thing that you're talking about. What do you mean?
Right. So this is the exiting of the income tax system for you.
Right. And again, there's more than one approach to all of this.
Yeah.
Because people are like, well, I get taxed directly from my employer, right? I granted, everybody's got a situation. However, this is where it kind of comes to the individual responsibility of it. Because the fact of the matter is, especially in 2024, of like people are kind of going, well, it's tough, I'm afraid, whatever the reason is. We kind of have to go, folks, like it's 2024, no more bullshit, right? Like you're either funding genocide, children's deaths, or these kinds of things, or you're not. There isn't a hum and haw about this, right? Like think like if you're going up to prime creator source God, whatever you want, whatever label you want to put it, and God's like, hey, kids were dying, and you paid for it. And you're like, well, like I just wasn't emotionally there yet. And God's like, I gave you the shit.
I gave you
it to you. Like, and I sent them you. I sent you. You're there to protect the kids. Yeah. Would you and you paid the dark.
Well, I mean, this is originally from what I've researched, I think one of the original definitions of the term sin is to have awareness or knowledge and to not act upon it.
Ooh, I like that.
And so there seems to be something tied into that. So then, just to be clear for people, to get the soundbite, then, or whatever we're going for here. So for you, since this, since being the last one on the battlefield, let's just say in terms of taxes, have you been continuously notified about taxes owing since then? So they stopped all requests for your tax payments since they went silent on their end and you
And not
submitted
just
your
me. And not just me.
and
Like
others. Yeah.
everybody. Everybody. Yes.
Okay.
So you just
Yes.
keep going. I mean, if they respond to you, you keep going. You respond back. If they respond to you, you
Precisely.
respond back.
But it has now reached a limit in terms of their time to respond. They've expired that opportunity for themselves. So
Yes.
then you're in a situation then where you're running a business that isn't plugged into enough of the system that you have the sovereignty there. You know, because you were saying some people, their employment is tied into the government, so they feel stuck on that regard. But because let me clarify. One of the other ways that I've seen this done is through the path of the social insurance number, right? So,
Yep.
right, the idea that the social insurance number makes you a federal employee, it makes you an employee of the federal government, and that rescinding yourself of that, you are no longer an employee of the federal government.
Yes.
And from that point, you can be a free person. But so, you know, I saw a guy being interviewed about this. I think it was like Freeman Society or something like that. He was being interviewed. It was like Global News morning show or something. And he was stating that since doing this, he now, you know, he's outside of the system. He's free of that. He drives without a license because he owns his car. So he drives from point A to point B as is his like right by law.
Yep.
But he did state that to make money now, he's doing all this sort of contract work, self-employment. Like he has to generate employment for himself outside of the system.
Right.
So that seems to be one of the requisites of moving in this direction, right? You can't be building a life that is built inside the system.
Yes and no. Right.
Okay.
So I'll but I totally see where that guy's coming from. And by the way, some of the people that wrote this letter did have an employment situation with that they weren't self-employed. Let's put it that way, right?
And you have the complete how-to of what you guys are doing on your website, right?
Pretty much, but you know, there
people
really
can communicate with you, and you can give advice. Let's say
potentially. We're pretty swamped right now, but honest to goodness, it's like martial arts. You can give somebody as much training as humanly possible, but no self-defense situation is going to be exactly the same. You know what I mean? So a lot of the times, even along the way, because we've helped people not just with this, but with a lot of other things, and this is where the court case comes in, because it all started from helping a child not get injected with the COVID vaccine, right? Like that's where everything starts. But the short version is a lot of the ways that people were assisted were really just us writing letters and responding to the response. And the less of that you have to depend on somebody else to do it, the more that you become independent and empowered, right? Like I understand people need help, but this is where we've tried to put as much as humanly possible, including templates on top of all that. Now, just with taxes alone, and actually it also goes with court cases, where they're like, oh, I want you to pay $100,000, $10,000, $300,000, right? Despite the fact that we have the Supreme Court of Canada being like, the Emergencies Act was unlawfully enacted, right? And the court case in Alberta that was like the lockdown measures were illegally enacted, right? Like we have so many pieces of evidence even within their own jurisdiction, but they're still trying to get Kristen Nagel, they're still trying to get Dr. Core, they're still trying to get all of these. Like but it's happening because we're letting it happen, and we're also funding it, right? So at this juncture, between the Winnipeg lab and the incredible, we've got it on the website and linked to the descriptions, but there's a ex-police officer in London that has uncovered the fraud and the ties to Companies House, which is like all major companies of the world registering Companies House. It's only been around since like 1864 or 1848, one of the two. So they've been doing it for a while. And even though, you know, we have to produce our papers and everything like that and validate and verify who we are, the companies that register there don't. Meaning, and again, he's got all the evidence now. We're talking World Trade Center, we're talking Epstein clients, we're talking governments, we're talking ties between these and real estate to weapons manufacturers. Like, it's everything. So this is like the full stop right here. We have the evidence, period. Here is fraud. Your company, which can be CRA, government, doesn't matter. Your company is committing fraud under the international covenants and treaties, and even the Criminal Code of Canada. I think it's 479.2 or something like that, which is facilitating organized crime. I cannot lawfully engage with your company unless you are directing me or enticing me into criminality. I am not a participant of the fraud. I see the harm that is being done. I have the evidence. Here's the National Citizens Inquiry final report. Here's the evidence of the Companies House. Here's the Criminal Code of Canada things. Here are the expert testimonials for blah, 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 blah. You guys are criminals. I'm telling you that. Unless you are enticing me into indentured servitude or enticing me into committing a crime, this can be said to a judge, this can be said to a CRA, doesn't matter. You are a business, you are a corporation, you are on the United States Securities and Exchange, you are on Dun & Bradstreet, you are not legitimate, and I am not an employee of yours. I am not going to allow myself or my family to be complicit in the crime. Boom, there it is. Judge, you want me to pay $100,000? We can't. I don't have disclosure. Who are you? Who am I dealing with right now?
Why do you have
What is your
authority over me?
affiliation to Companies
What
House?
contract do we have together?
What's that?
Why do you have authority over me? What contract have we signed together?
And produce it. Produce that.
This is
If
where
you're making that
it
claim,
comes to the social contract that bothers me. What
Ah,
social contract?
so you know what? And we have heard that, right? But this is the thing with everything that we've done. Let's even go back to the citizen's arrest. You, the government, the police, and everything, you have violated every level of law, lawfulness, social contract, legal contract, breach of trust, whatever. You have violated every level of that humanly possible. There is no moral, legal, or lawful grounds that you have to stand on whatsoever anymore. You're done. That's it. We gave you a chance. We gave you a shot to do the right thing. And this is where, you know, even in our case, so we started helping a mother with that. She'd already lost a daughter to the fraudulent medical system. So out of 2 kids, she has 1 left. It's terrible. Basically she said, you know what, like I wanted to exit out of the system before. Her words, if I'd done that before, I might still have 2 daughters. That not my words, hers, right? But that's nobody can say whether that's true or not, right? Like it's and neither is that relevant. She did everything that she could to save her daughter. It didn't work out, so she tried a different method the second time around, right? And the short version is, we wrote letters, wrote the judge, we dealt with it as a business, did status, da 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 da. No one rebutted the status. This is where it got kicked up all the way to the Regional Senior Justice of Peel. So for those that don't know, you've got your Ontario Court of Justice. That's like just the basic corporate level over here. The next level up is the Superior Court of Justice, and the next level up is the Supreme Court of Canada. Within each court, they're broken up into regions, and then within that region, there's one individual that sits as the Regional Senior Justice. So ours went up from Ontario Court to Superior Court to the Regional Senior Justice of Peel. So his name is Leonard Ricchetti. And eventually we were going to go in, there was a group of us. It wasn't just, 2 or 3 people. We were going to go in care of her trust with her daughter, because that's the corporate fiction that they come in. So we were going to act as caretakers of the trust. She didn't want to do that, no problem. So we kind of lost touch with her back in September of 2022. At that point, Leonard, or Lenny, as we call him, Lenny had sent a bunch of people a notice saying like, hey, no more letters. Every single one of our letters along the way didn't just have evidence of the fraud status and all that other kind of stuff. We also called it the crimes, right? Like, and we had at least 1,200 pages of Criminal Code of Canada evidence. We had all of the evidence of the bioweapons and the COVID vaccines. We had, you know, like just piles and piles and piles of stuff. Without exaggeration, thousands of pages of evidence. We notified the Canadian Judicial Council, who would, it's judges oversee judges. So if you have a problem with a judge, you gather their buddies together and then they make judgments on judges. But again, this is where we tested every aspect of the system. I cannot stress that enough. They are corrupt all the way to the top. The Canadian Judicial Council is comprised of people from the Supreme Court of Canada, including Richard Wagner, who's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. It's all corrupt, period. There's no anyways. So the CJC said, oh, Leonard Ricchetti's fine and dandy, no problem. But he said, no more letters, not evidence, no more letters. So separate from that, we wanted to mirror what common law court in the UK was doing. So I sent out a lawful notice hearing required, talking about all of the taxation things, harms, COVID stuff, and I sent it to every single regional senior justice in Ontario. And then Leonard Ricchetti called a couple of us into court because he said, you breached my order. It had nothing to do with that other case, totally separate things. And the letter very specifically said, hey, like this is an issue of the utmost importance. There are lives at stake. This letter is being sent to every regional senior justice in Ontario. So he called us into court on December 8th, 2022. And we did what is proper there. We declared ourselves as beneficiaries of the trust, and said that he has no jurisdiction. We declared him as the trustee. Then I gave him some directions, dismissed the case, and reimbursed me for the damages to the tune of $55,000. On December 8th of 2022, he stayed the charges. Stayed doesn't mean dismissed, because then they have to put it as like you won on the official public record. But stay just means this is just going to go away. We're not dealing with this anymore. Now, what he said on that day was a few things that were really interesting. He brought a box with him, and he said, do you see this box with these letters in it? This is all the evidence that we'd set. And I just smiled and I said, yes, I do. And he goes, do you know how disruptive to the court this is? Again, this is evidence. These aren't letters saying, bad judge. This is evidence about the protection of human life. Irrefutable, and like nothing's been done. So I said, did you read those letters? Sir, I read all of the letters. One of two things happens now. We have this man on perjury because he was there, allegedly, operating under his oath. If he didn't actually read the letters, he lied. That's perjury. That's a federal offense. Or we have him on criminal negligence, dereliction of duty, breach of trust, and a whole bunch of other things. He committed a crime one way or the other. It doesn't matter. We never would have got that if we hadn't tested the system and chosen to help a child. But again, we walked away. Because our objective was never to get our butts out of the fire. We could have done that a long time ago. We could have just said, sovereign, see you later, right? Our goal is the preservation of human life, protecting the children, and actually manifesting the world that we want to live in. Because of that, we weren't done with Leonard. So he got a notice of lien because of all the crimes that he committed. He didn't like that very much. So on April 12th, 2023, he sent his goons from the Peel Police to our home, and they arrested us and took our phones and our laptops. They have them still to this day as part of the court case. So this is a new phone here, but our laptops and phones are still with the Peel Police, despite the fact that they were just looking for evidence that we sent the letters, which if they just asked, we would have said yes.
No, they have to make a statement. They have to. This is what we've seen over and over again through COVID.
They want to scare you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. January 6th.
Psychological warfare.
It's psychological warfare. Exactly.
Don't do this again. And get other people not even to think about doing it.
Exactly. But the officers we dealt with that day were all like, the basic tone was like, we don't want to do this. Why did you send the letters? Why are you making us do this? Our response to that, which again, so many things are now on the official public record. Number one, they're like, we don't want to do this. You guys seem like good people. Number two, we have several officers actually agreeing with us on the record and saying, yeah, like, you know, there was coercion here. There was this, that, and the other thing. Well, guess what? According to the Police Services Act, they had a lawful duty and oath to act on those things. They just admitted to criminal negligence. We have that on the official public record. I can't state that enough. And it all happened because of this. So we have a whole bunch of other things from the Crown Attorney, laws that they've ignored, international covenants and treaties that they've ignored. And throughout this entire process, no one has rebutted our status, not on paper and not in person in court with the Regional Senior Justice of Peel on December 8th, 2022. No one has rebutted status, meaning it stands in truth and in commerce. And now we're taking all of this evidence, which we have, like the actual zip files, we have them from that police officer in the UK. That's going on the public record too. So on April 8th, we're going in there with our declarations of non-consent and a few other things, and we are saying, okay, folks, we don't have disclosure. Who are you? What are your ties to these criminal entities in Companies House? Because the Supreme Court and the Ontario Court, they're listed over there. So who are you? Who is Leonard? Why is there a continued attack going on us and everybody else here? And like, we're not here to deal with this court matter that you guys are talking about. We're here to deal with your fraud, your crimes, your damage to our assets, and on and on and on it goes. But a court case can't proceed without disclosure. So when we come in and say we don't have disclosure, here's the evidence. If you ignore it, that's obstruction of justice. We're just getting that on the record.
So because of your status, who are they going after? Or what are they going after?
So what they are actually going after is the legal fiction, right? And they're trying to entice us into that system,
which is like your birth certificate, your social insurance number, the government idea of what you are as a person, but it's just numbers on, it's letters on paper. Gotcha.
But it's when you cave and you say you lawyer up, or you or you just say like, I don't want to deal with it anymore. It's when you cave that they have you back in the system.
It's so interesting because you're skating a very interesting line. You're not acknowledging that the system is legitimate, so you're working outside the system, but you're using their own laws against them, or you're using the code itself against them to say that you're illegitimate.
A little bit of both, yeah.
It's a dual thing. You have to, like, there's a certain amount. So we I don't want to say preach, but we talk a lot about a parallel economy, and we've talked a lot about a parallel society as well. it's more abstract than an economy, right? The economy is happening. The society, people can't wrap their heads around it. Some people.
It's a great point. And when you've got that thing of that little tiny
this is
thing
what you're
called,
doing. What I'm saying, sorry, is this is what you're
Yep.
doing, right? So this is very encouraging for me. Is that this is putting it. It's not just like the idea of it. You guys are doing it. The actions are happening, and you're because I think that we should have our own. And you guys have done it. You have done these meetings where you've questioned these things that we have not questioned, that we've stopped questioning about the legitimacy and the authority of the government and their actions. And so, I think there needs to be a citizens court. There needs to be these citizens arrests. There needs to be us performing these things that have been institutionalized into these corporations that we've never agreed to, just because we're born in a country. Michael Malice talks about this. I don't know if you know who Michael Malice is, either of you. He has a book called the Anarchist Handbook, and he actually makes an interesting argument for anarchy. And to a certain, and anarchy is not like, no crime and everything, just lawlessness. It's saying it's voluntary association. It's basically libertarianism taken a step further. But so this parallel society, we need that, and you're setting the foundation for us to be able to do something like that. So it's really, and it ties so many. I mean, we should have numerous conversations about this, because we can go on a lot of different topics here. But so sorry, yeah. So this parallel society that we need to do, the actions are what's necessary, right? You're telling people start acting, because otherwise you're tacitly approving of what they're doing.
I'm not telling anybody to do anything.
I'm not telling anybody.
I'm teasing, right?
But
there's something fundamental there. You're right.
Yes.
You're right, because people cannot be told to do this. It has to be of their own free will, because otherwise, where is the refining of their will in this process? If they are trying to ride off of your will into this, it will ultimately fail. It really has to be the determination of the sovereign individual that is the driving force, because like you said, there isn't just one path, and people need to figure out what is the correct path for them. It's potentially unique because there are many paths and many situations that people find themselves in. For example, let's say someone is reliant upon the healthcare system in Canada, okay? Like deeply reliant upon it. What options do they have to exit the system to the extent that they are no longer, sort of enslaved by the corporate entity that is the state, while also still being able to rely upon something that may be life-saving for them within the public healthcare system? Because I know that there are some ways of exiting the system where you lose access to some of that, but that, I don't know, like what.
No, and that's it's a super popular question for very obvious reasons, right? You've touched on something that a lot of people have asked about. Very understandable. The simple way to put it is, when you're doing a correction, right? You're basically you're still able to do business with these entities. You're just dealing with it from a different standing, right? So rather than being an indebted slave into the system, you're now going, no, these, like, I can deal with you, but I'm dealing with you as the beneficiary of the trust and a creditor rather than a debtor,
as a sovereign individual.
So like I can go to the hospital and get my health care and everything like that. I'm the man or the woman that controls these assets. So they, like, we're just engaging that way, right? So if I need to save my life or go to the hospital or save my kid's life or do something like that, yeah, no problem. It's not like I'm saying I can't deal with you anymore. I'm just dealing with it as a higher standing.
Okay, but then I have a question then, because if that's the case, then why can they not keep coming after you for the taxes? Or not you, but what you've taken a hold of. Can't they still say that thing that you're controlling owes us?
So no. Okay. Yes and no. Short version is there are enough assets within that thing to deal with whatever they come at you for. But in addition, and then we all know all of those assets are just debt anyways, right? Like it's fraudulent, nothing based in reality debt anyway. So
Fiat currency. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But there's also a like they wouldn't even, if you do like let's say a holds harmless indemnity agreement where you're basically like um that like my straw man takes on the debt, the responsibility and everything like that, and the man or the woman does none, right? So you separate them into two different things over there, and again, there's enough assets to take care of whatever fake stuff they want to do there. But I should also point out that on those things, there are some doctors and healthcare people that are really starting to wake up to this reality and going like, oh, the way that they have me by the balls, so to speak. Pardon the crudeness there, but the way that they have us is this license, right? And well, this license gives me the authority to practice medicine. And it's like, well, who gives you the license? Oh, this entity. And then we'll like, or are they legitimate? Well, no. Okay. So,
I mean, there's so
it's
many rabbit holes to go down in terms of legitimacy, and
yes.
this goes back to Rockefeller's education. They took over the medical industry, and they
Yep.
basically pushed everybody out through subversive measures. Right? This fifth generation warfare is not. I mean, now it's fifth generation, so it's different because it's all subversive, but it's goes way back. The subversive aspect of it goes a long way, and this is why reframing the way we think about these things is so important. And the education system makes it so that people think in this rudimentary way that you're unable to even conceive these notions. Right? I'm sure these judges are confused as hell because they can't even, their minds can't even, like, the framework that they see the world through doesn't even allow them to be like, okay, well, this guy is charging me. Wait, I'm the judge. Like, what's going on here? But it's reframing from the ground up, from literally that's why the homeschooling aspect is so important. And
Yeah.
people like Emily Jones that we've spoken to, Simon, at Home Tribe, facilitating this communion, I guess, of people that want to homeschool. This is the parallel economy, parallel society thing. We build our own education system over here. We decide to do this together. And I think an interesting point with healthcare, to put it, to edify it a little bit, or to put it more in a different perspective, if you look at Canada and the US healthcare system wise, right? Canada, because of the taxes, the healthcare system in Canada works that everybody, homeless people all get healthcare. They all get Medicare. They're all insured, right, to go to the hospital. So that pool of money, like you said, exists there, whether or not you're paying taxes. But so to put it into a different perspective, it's the states, you choose your insurance company, your insurance policy. So it's a voluntary association. I'm paying you for a service, and I'm choosing this service. So there is not this healthcare system that Canada has in the background, right? That's why the taxes thing in Canada, like, that's why you asked that question, I think, Simon, is so if you're using this service, can't they say, oh, well, you need to pay taxes to use this service? It's like, well, no, this service you're providing, homeless people, anybody can use it. You can't refuse. There's a law in Canada that you can't be refused at an emergency room or a hospital, and they will have to take care of you. And then in the States, there's this whole thing that people say all the time is, well, people have to mortgage their houses to pay for their medical bills, and that's a whole nother story. But this idea of exiting the system, the US has it a lot more separated than Canada. Canada has become this all-encompassing nanny state government that controls everything. We've gotten used to it, and we don't question it. And Quebec, where I am, is a particular case. Quebecers are very very comfortable with this idea of the daddy government. And that's why COVID, we had 8 p.m. curfews. I don't know about you guys, but we had 8 p.m. curfews for a long time, and people were happy about it. Like, people were like, yeah, there's these stupid people. They're not wearing masks. They're not taking the shot. So there's the reframing of the way we think about things is so important. And it's hard. Sorry, last thing. It's hard to conceptualize in the system we're in, but we have to bring it back to a smaller level, right? We're 33 million people in Canada, or 30, whatever, something around those lines, 300 million in the States. Let's put it into context, have a an intellectual experiment of 1,000 people living together. How do 1,000 people live together? We have to, like, if you want to live, in harmony, we have to agree to live in certain ways. Maybe we have a communal fund that funds certain things, and we have a bit of a council, but it's all voluntary association. And we do then have, let's say, a social contract with individuals. But to have this implicit, arbitrary, abstract social contract that people talk about, that you're just, indebted, it's indentured servitude to the government, to the state, you're an employee of the state, you're owned by the state on paper. We need to kind of go through that experiment. Okay, how do we do this? How do we deal with crime? How do we deal with medicine? How do we deal with education on a small 1,000-person level? And then you can start to build. And then obviously republics are people being able to live together on in more separated ways and having representative government. But you really, and this seems to me like this is what you have done and are doing, is breaking it down to the foundational level and say, okay, well, this is not, we didn't agree to this. This is illegitimate. We're not doing that thing.
And by the way, sorry, the evidence that we use in our court case, it's basically like 12 exhibits, is available as well. But like Exhibit 1 is the police criminal negligence. Exhibit 2 is that like a judge who's taken the injection, which basically all of them have, if not all of them has, is not able to act of sound mind and body because of the COVID bioweapons and the neurological damage that it does. Exhibit 3 is the Supreme Court bias, and like all the. But in Exhibit 8 is like that this has been a premeditated attack by the negative military since like 1964. We've got all the evidence for that, and like it's crazy once you start going down there. But again, we have it all. And then exhibits 10 and 11 are the facts that like Canada doesn't legally or lawfully exist, and it is a corporation doing business as. That changes everything, right? So even when you're talking about when you come in with the taxes and everything like that, or healthcare, right? The fact of the matter is everything is based on fraud, and in law, fraud vitiates everything. Meaning, like if your foundation's fraud, it's void. So that's where it becomes so important to call that out, and then create the alternative. And we've got people that are doing the healthcare alternative that are starting to come out, whether it's the wellness center, some people down in the States, some of the people in BC, like it's happening as we go along, right? Like people in the States, or police in the States, are starting to shift from regular police to constitutional sheriffs, and entire counties are doing that, right? Like the answers and the remedies exist. People just need to do them. But ultimately, this thing is going to get is so big that the only remedy at this point is going to be through the military. And
this is where
right?
where I'm a little at odds with the idea, because the founding fathers in the U.S. were very much against a standing army and a military. But
yeah,
so that's why they instantiated the Second Amendment. But Canada, clearly, the taking away of weapons is, every tyrannical government that has committed atrocities has first unarmed its citizens. Yep. Right. So we're there, and so the military here, I'm sure that the top rungs of the military are corrupt as well.
Oh, they are. They are. Yeah, and they're loyal to the crown, which is its own thing, right? But the reality of it is Canada is actually part of the United States, or the Republic of the United States. It's actually a branch of Texas. And again,
that we got to go into.
That can be validated, and it's all available in the evidence in the court case as well. But yeah,
for me, that's a
well.
If that's true, that's yeah.
I'm hip to that jive. Believe me, like it's.
I'm down to be part of Texas. Let's.
Well, it's funny. Like I wondered about that. One of the ways I came across this notion of Canada being essentially just completely dominated by the U.S. was actually just in a ufology dive. Funnily enough, there's the Shag Harbor is the most documented UFO case in history, and it occurred on Canadian soil, and full authority was given to the U.S. military to to overtake the entire investigation, to run the whole thing. Canada just completely submitted all of its power. And I always looked at that case and I was like, what the hell was that? We just we just gave it all. Why would we do that? Puzzle pieces like that sort of click a little bit more for me when I look back over the years of research. And I think, there's something to that, but it's sort of to bring it back to the initial analogy that you made of the board, right?
Yeah.
So you have this April 8th case coming up.
Yes.
Which, let me just note, it's pretty crazy that you have that case on the day of this massive eclipse.
We are aware.
That's so awesome. What a great movie. But where are you
funny.
at?
What a great movie this is, huh?
It is best movie ever made. It's incredible.
Reality is really more interesting than a lot of these movies, tell you the truth. But
you couldn't write a movie this good. So, but then in your, in the sort of on your quest, is this the board that you're about to break through? How do you see this April 8th event for you? What does it mean symbolically for what you represent here on this mission, and what are the potential outcomes?
In universal law, you don't want to condition things, right? So I don't want to condition any kind of outcome, right? Because there's the possibilities, the positive possibilities could be far greater than even I or any of us could imagine, right? So you don't want to limit those kinds of things. But that being said, with the eclipse energy, with the fact that the call them whatever we want, right? Call it the good guys, the Alliance, the Galactic Federation, like whatever the heaven you want to call it, right? They've been saying since 2020 that 2024 is going to be the year of disclosure. We could have, and in a lot of cases did accelerate that timeline through the actions that we did, and it could have been even sooner. It's neither here nor there, right? We are here right now. And the amount of disclosure and things coming out in the public that we've had, even in this year thus far, has just been wild. Whether it's like the company's house evidence that, I can't stress this enough, uncovers the entire bloody thing with irrefutable evidence, to like even back to the World Trade Center, right? Like this thing goes wild. But the bioweapon in the or the bioweapons lab in Winnipeg, the connection with the Chinese spies, and that we all knew that, and we all knew who it was doing, and we even sent that evidence to the Halton police, the RCMP, all this stuff. We've been sending them that kind of stuff since then. Now it's just available in the public, meaning we have them on treason, meaning like your government that you're upholding, and it's King Charles versus us on paper, right? So when we go in there and say, hey, where's Charlie? Oh, you can't bring him in here? Well, okay, I guess you really don't have a claim. But in addition to that, we're not going to pretend any longer that this man isn't on Epstein's list. Like, we're going to say that in court.
Yeah.
And little Mark Dean, Crown Attorney over there, if you want to represent a pedophile, that's cool, man. That's you. But we're not playing that game anymore. And all we're going to do is state the truth. For all of us here. I think it's good for us to remember, acknowledge, check ourselves every so often that, we are all part of a divine plan right now. And this is it's going to happen however it's going to happen, and people are going to be at different levels of that, and their understanding, knowingness, right? Overstanding, whatever you want to call it. People are going to be at different levels of what that means. That's fine. The point being, though, at the end of the day, I'll speak for myself and a few of us. Our objective is to know that we did everything that we were capable of to face this thing head on, protect the children, and do our duty
Well,
in all of
lead
this.
by example is really what it is. That's only, you can only do what you're capable of doing, and you try to do as much as you can. But the ultimate, well, not goal, because I think you're just doing what you think is right. Is this you doing what you
Standing
think
on
is
the
right?
pillars of principle. That's what we call it, right?
And from there,
and
what
I
people
and I
decide to do themselves, you don't want to coerce that. You don't want to dictate that. It's, take this. We're doing this. Take this and do what you will with it.
exactly, right? Like you can't have free will and choice at the expense of somebody else's, right? And universal law number one is like you have to hold free will and choice in the highest reverence, right? So people can do whatever they want with it. We're not telling anybody to do this, do that, or the other thing. But here are the facts, right? And the law is very clear that if you fund, participate with, whatever, the thing that is causing harm, loss, and trespass, then you are liable and complicit with it. And that goes for a legal standing, a lawful standing, and a spiritual and moral standing as well. Where, in 2024, in that year of disclosure, we ought to consider that disclosure to ourselves of like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I am liable for. But on the other side of that, there are options available. There are alternative routes, and I just need to make a choice.
Can we quickly go back to so I'm just going to say this, and Simon, you can ask if we can do this right after. Can we go back to Texas and Canada in a sec? Ask your question, Simon. But the idea of country as well. But Simon, go ahead.
No, let's do the Texas thing first.
Okay.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. Right. So the idea of country, let's start with. So the greatest example for me of what you're talking about, and this, active non-participation, let's say, is maybe a way of putting it, or non-acknowledgement of this illegitimate structure, is the Revolutionary War, is the War of Independence in the States. They said, no, we're not doing this. They create a declaration. You start with a declaration saying you are committing these crimes against us, the colonies, and we declare that you are illegitimate to us. Your authority over us is illegitimate. And I mean, ideally, and now in the 21st century in North America, particularly, other places in the world have more, on the ground war. I guess fourth generation war. Or I don't know, whatever, active war, physical on the ground, boots on the ground war.
Kinetic warfare.
Kinetic warfare. That's it. We are not familiar with this, or that idea is like violence and the idea of doing anything through that, which is, some things inevitably have to come to that. I'm not advocating that at all. I'm not saying let's have a civil war. I'm just saying, like, we're so not familiar with that. But is that a possibility if we see the government going one step further and really, doing stuff that is egregious? But it's okay. All that to say, the idea of a country, how does Canada become this idea of a country that actually isn't a country and is actually part of Texas? And what's the history with Texas?
So, without going too much into it, I'll say a couple of things that the people can research on their own, right? Because that's really the most empowering thing to do with any of this, right? But it's what you started with the war for independence is actually it's a great point, right? So the original articles of Confederation for the states, pretty sure it's Article 11. You're going to want to take a close look at that one, okay? Where Canada actually has the option to join the republics of the United States. That's right in there. Pretty sure it's number 11, but it's the original Articles of Confederation. And the other one, which solidifies a few different things, the illegitimacy of the British North American Act and a whole bunch of other things. You want to go to the Washington Declaration of 1871. And in effect, this treaty contract, it's all a contract, right? Treaties are just contracts between countries, right? But treaty law is the highest form of law. We'll get to that in a moment because that's part of the solution. But the 1871 Washington Declaration, if you read it, you will glean that Canada was basically given to the United States as a reparation for the war by Britain. Canada was treated as an asset rather than a country. And to this day, we have all these things, right? And there were, like, Simon mentioned the ufology, breakdown of that one, which is really cool. I didn't know about that. I'm sure Sensei did, but there are other more recent ones, even within the last 4 years, where like a decision in New York was made and then something changed, like in the courts of New York was made and then something changed over in Canada in response to that. And it's like, why would that, in a similar way? That's yours is even cooler because that's a military example, right? Where they come in for that one. But the point being, you can take this all the way back to the original Articles of Confederation for the states and the Washington Declaration of 1871, let alone the Statutes Law Revision Act of 1893, and a whole bunch of other things, right? But again,
you've given people information that they need to look in further. Maybe we can go into these in depth in the future.
We have future conversations we have to have. I think really because it's endless. But
yeah.
but I'll bring up the thing that I was going to bring up earlier, which is to say that I think, and you probably come across this a lot, because of the conditioning of the modern, citizen. They want, like, what is the formula to get out? Please give me the way out. And that in and of itself is their conditioning speaking, And so there has to be the release of that conditioning of, please, an external authority, please govern me. Please tell me how to do it. That is like the basic conditioning that we're needing to release. And so there's, I think, just to put that out there, because I think it's important to include in the episode, so that people maybe think twice before coming at you, being like, please tell me how to be free. I think people should understand that element of it, that there's some conditioning that we all need to let go of. And it takes time, and, because we were raised where we were raised. So I think that's an important point here, and that there are numerous paths out, and everyone needs to find what their path is. Whether they're going to take the path out or not is another big decision. But there's a lot to this. And I think a lot of people on the daily are waking up to this possibility. I think you have a growing awareness of, wait a minute, I can exit the system to an extent. I can negate this contract that allegedly I have with me and the government, but I don't really.
Right. I never signed anything. Like, what contract is?
Yeah. So I think that's important. So I think what we should do is certainly have a follow-up after your experience on the 8th and see what is born of that. I think that's important, given the scope of, the experiment that you've been in. Your experiment has been testing all the elements of the system to have direct empirical experience that tells you they're corrupt, right? And I think this is another philosophical point that I really work hard to drive people towards. You have to rely on empiricism. You have to rely on your embodied experience of what is going on to then take action based off of what you've had direct experience of. And this is what gets tricky, right? Because people get caught in internet rabbit holes, and then they act off of imitations of things that they've come across instead of saying, what is happening here in my community, in my life? What do I have to go off of in my direct experience? And so I think it's important to point out that you've done that, and it's been your direct experience of the system failing you at all the places it's supposed to be of service to you, and then you're responding accordingly with
Mhm.
the evidence of that corruption being right in front of you. So I think that's really important. I think it's really important for people to understand the service that you're providing in proving all these different levels of corruption, because a lot of people use that as a black pill.
Mhm.
A lot of people like it's all corrupt right to the top. What can we do? You look at like Kristen Nagel's story and like, her going and trying to fight and sue people for libel and then losing and having to pay $100,000 to these
That that
propaganda
was that
outlets.
was nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I
But
think
she used the system,
that's right. She did
right?
not declare the level of sovereignty, and she sort of, which, again, I just think that what she's going through, what you're going through, with the framing that you're offering it kind of kills that black pill of it's all corrupt. It's all corrupt, when in fact, showing that it's all corrupt is one of the points, one of the stepping stones that we use to declare further sovereignty.
Mhm.
It's really important to reframe that, because a lot of people use that as a point of deep hopelessness,
Of
when in fact,
nihilism. Yeah.
you've inverted it, or maybe it was inverted and you've taken it into the correct place. I don't know, right? But it's important.
No, well, it's a great point, and for us and the fact that we're in this court case right now, I mean, it wasn't by choice. Like we were literally um, dragged there under threat, duress, and coercion, but we used the opportunity, right? So that's a different thing there, and we stood on our principles, right? You are corrupt, you are illegitimate, you are committing crimes. We don't recognize your authority or jurisdiction, and you don't have it over me, right? I'm not pointing at Kristen or anybody else who does it, one way. Um, but it's the same kind of concept when it's like, let's say it's, I'm going to sue somebody for libel or whatever it might be, right? Or even let's say your son died from the Pfizer vaccine and you're suing the government, you're suing Pfizer, right? You're still asking an illegitimate individual acting as a judge, working for an illegitimate corporation who is also complicit with the crime and has every reason to rule against you, because the second that they say uh, you are correct, their entire structure of the past 4 years falls apart, and ultimately they become liable because of criminal negligence, obstruction of justice, and everything else that they did. They have every reason to prop themselves up in power, which by definition of law means that they cannot, under any circumstances, adjudicate the case, because they have an inherent bias, and like it can't be helped. This is where they've very intentionally removed our access to the jury, and they brought us down a level. So we had bigger charges where they're like, yeah, like this can be like 2 years in prison because you sent a letter to a judge. Like it's I'm like and we're just like,
They
yeah,
really think we're stupid. They really
yeah.
think we're
And we literally, because they're like, okay, you can do this at like the Ontario court level, the Superior Court, no jury, and Superior Court with the jury. And we're like, yeah, give us a jury. And they're like, well, you might go to prison for 2 years. You really need to consider. Yeah. Give us a jury. Give us access to the common law. We will take this with the jury. You can't be trusted. That charge, big 2-year one, dropped. Crown's not pursuing it anymore. Now it's Ontario court, judge, no jury, and the biggest thing that we could get is a misdemeanor. It's not even going to get to that, right? But the point being, they try and intimidate you, and it's when you stand your ground that you get some real results there. But again,
when you cave, when you
yeah.
cave is the problem.
Now, I'll say one other thing, and potential follow up. Like, if you guys want to do a follow up after the 8th, I think that'd be great, especially after the eclipse energy and the Lionsgate. The other side to it, because you kind of touched on it with Canada and the Treaty of 1871. Treaty law would be the highest laws of the land in any country and everything like that, right? Like everything is basically treaties. Charter of Rights and Freedoms was made as a response to the international covenants and treaties, right? Like originally it was the Bill of Rights and Constitution, and then the international covenants and treaties came on. The Queen ratified them, and then we got the Charter of Rights that came off of that. So when we get called pseudo legal and everything like that, even by the Crown prosecutor, we go like, what the heck is pseudo legal about this? Like we're using UCC law, we're using SEC law, we're using the law of like merchants, we're using the international covenants and treaties. Like the only person that isn't following the letter of the law are you guys. But even then, when you think about treaty law and you recognize that this is warfare, and you prove that this is warfare, then we become the civilian non-combatants in war language. And civilian non-combatants do have remedy and recourse and reparation available to them through treaty. And that's something that we've actually been working on for a while. We've put together, we've got it to various military sources. So it's on the website, but there is
cngalliance.com, right?
This one is actually on the Lakeshore Sovereign Assembly website. This one is lakeshore.sovereignassembly.com. And then Peace Treaty is one of them there. But if anybody is interested and you want to look into the Law of War Manual, it's just over 1,199 pages. No big deal. Just
a light read.
And just for the record, some of our folks with English as a second language have read all 1,199 pages. It's actually a bit more now because it got updated, but they've read the entire Law of War Manual. So English as a second language.
If you're interested in freedom and sovereignty and liberty in let's say parallel economy, that some people don't even know the term, but the idea that we acknowledge that our government's corrupt and what do we do about it? We need to, and I'm not familiar even remotely enough with this, so I'd love to have more conversations about this for sure. But this is so important, because if we want to actually return to a sense of sovereignty, of responsibility, of self-governance, of actualization, or what you said, self-realization, we need to inform ourselves of what our rights are. And that even now I'm starting to question this idea of rights. The government should not be involved in declaring your rights at all, right?
They don't.
Exactly.
And that's a distinction that people would want to look into, is the idea of intrinsic or fundamental rights, or what are sometimes called God-given rights, right?
Right.
And that term is codified in every treaty law, every criminal code,
natural law, right? It's like referred to as natural law.
The fact that like we're born and these rights just come with that package of being
the Declaration of Independence, right? That's the first couple lines of the Declaration of Independence. It's saying, all men are created equal, that line. I'd like to actually, so there's a couple quotes that as we were talking that came to mind that I'd like to maybe go over, and we should wrap up a little bit because we're getting to 2 hours. I'd like to maybe go over a couple of these, and I can get your guys' reaction to them, and then we can kind of close off. Is that good?
Yeah, let's go for it. I got to be done in the 15. I can't go past 2 hours.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So last thing is what made the pseudo legal thing. What that made me think of is like modern medicine and naturopath.
Yeah.
Modern medicine is like, oh, what's this voodoo you're doing over there? And naturopaths are like, what voodoo? We're talking about nutrition. We're talking about eat good food. Make sure you have the right nutrients. It's like, oh yeah, they're pseudo scientists, pseudo doctors. It's like, what are you talking about? We're using nature to heal ourselves, and we're acknowledging that our diet actually affects our health. So that's a little sidebar, but it's we see it kind of everywhere, right? Sorry, one sec. Nope. Where'd you go, Simon? Oh, there you go. Present. This is a Jefferson quote. So Jefferson, quote, "You seem to consider the judges as the ultimate arbiters of all constitutional questions, a very dangerous doctrine indeed, and one which would place us under the despotism of an oligarchy. Our judges are as honest as other men, and not more so. They have with others the same passions for party power and the privilege of their cores. Their power is the more dangerous as they are in office for life and not responsible as the other functionaries are to the elective control. The Constitution has erected no such single tribunal, knowing that to whatever hands confided with the corruptions of time and party, its members would become despots." Does this ring true in some sense of what we're talking about with the court systems?
Absolutely. And this is where, again, I'll say that I'm guilty of this in this last thing. After dealing with Leonard and a few other people, and even the police and things, I gave these criminals a bit of a chance. I gave the Crown Attorney a bit of a chance, and because like they were so stunned in a good way. They're like, man, what is this? But at the same time,
Just confused. It's so,
yeah,
I can imagine the reaction. It's
but they're
hilarious.
still. I'll use a little bit of French here. Pardon me. They're still fucking with our lives. They still have our laptops. They're still committing harm onto us. And all we've ever done, I'll say collectively we, but let alone those of us in the court case, all we've ever done is bring life-saving evidence to the table and use the letter of the law. That's it. And they choose to continue to mess with our lives, disrupt business, take, and go like, oh, geez, like, sorry, we didn't mean, like, enough. That's it. So, as we say in martial arts, sometimes the only way out is through. And sometimes you got to go through the opponent. I don't care how nice they are anymore. I don't get like we are done with trying to convince people collectively. We ought no more writing to your MPs. They're complicit. No more Larry Brocks. No more Pierre Poilievre's. None of the they're complicit. That's it. It's 2024. We got to stop dicking around. You know what I mean? So you're getting a little bit of the heat from me now.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
me
yeah.
personally, obviously, right? But but this is where
It's angering. It's infuriating. It's especially when you start to wake up to this idea of sovereignty and being, what authority do you have over me? I didn't agree to like. What are you talking? Like who do you think you are? You're another individual. Who do you think you are?
Exactly.
We've created this structure that makes them think that they are, aristocrats, I guess.
And that they have the right, and they get to keep that as long as we participate with the illusion. And for us, we're at the point where we've done everything we could not to get them, not to punt you, because what you got it going on up here will manifest out there. If you think they got to hang, they got to be punished, they got to do all this, you're going to manifest punishment, right? But everything that we did was to protect and give these folks a shot at doing the right thing. Their shot's done. So now we go through them. Here's the evidence. Here are the facts. This is the law. That's it.
This is where you're saying exercise every option. This is
we've already done it, right? And this is where we could have a follow up on that one too. But the whole concept of a treaty of like we've been damaged, whether our businesses have been taken away, jobs, livelihoods, family members, like whether it's dead people or broken homes or whatever it is, there is loss. And in war, as the civilian non-combatants, we are due reparations. But that's we're working on that. We've still, we're just refining it, but it's basically done. But the main thing for individuals that they can do, and again, in the Stop Funding Crime thing on the TNG website, it's we've got some videos out that talk about things, links in the descriptions, law in the descriptions, evidence in the descriptions. But one of the things in there is a declaration of non-consent. And there's two examples. One's a little more technical with UCC law and stuff. Another one is a little more on a sovereign sense. But that declaration can be put onto paper. And Michael, you were mentioning it earlier about like the idea of getting to like a physical war, a kinetic war. But I hear that a lot, and then it always startles me how quickly people go to that, and they don't even consider the paperwork option. You know what I mean? So it's like I will pick up a gun and potentially shoot somebody before I send a letter that I have to write myself. Like it's like whoa guys, like can we try some paperwork first? Like maybe a treaty? I don't know. But anyways, that I
it's
kid.
because the anger and the frustration is just like, okay, well, this is the only way. There's no way of working in the system. They're so corrupt. What are we going to do? But
and the answer is go through them, right? Yeah. So and a declaration of non-consent, I think you guys might resonate with more of the second one.
This is what I'm looking at here.
That's the one. So okay, in those first 3 videos that I've got there, the descriptions of the videos have like all of the declarations and templates and everything like that. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
So if you go to the description, I've got the explanation of Companies House and an interview with the police officer. So he kind of goes through what on earth is Companies House? What are you looking at? Why is this so incredibly significant? And then as you can see there, we've got the declaration of non-consent on there. And it's something that can be said out loud on a daily basis. It's something that can be written down. You can send it to whoever the heaven you'd like. You want to send it to the CRA? Send it to the CRA. You want to send it to your mom and dad? Send it to your mom and dad. Like you want to send it to Trudeau? Send it to Trudeau. Like do whatever you want. It's your letter, right? So it's your life. It's your family.
Where is the declaration of non-compliance?
If you go into one of the videos, doesn't matter which one.
Yeah, this one.
And then if you, I think the screen's really small for me right now, but it's okay.
There you go.
That's the one. Yep. There's that, and that's the one that I'm talking about. So this one, there's some really great lawful stuff in there, but there's some really cool spirit stuff in there. The idea is this is a template.
Yeah.
One would modify either one of them to say whatever you want to say, because the idea is if it's not coming from here and from there and your connection with that, then it's not necessarily going to ring true, and you don't want to muddle things, right? So
some version of this is what you sent when you modified the status of your birth certificate.
Sort of. This one we actually came across a little more recently, so
there's a birth certificate
I would say that our paperwork for the birth certificate was a little bit different than that, but the same kind of concept, right? We had a statement of truth and a few other things in there that went with it, right? But the point being, that's a thing that people could do. And within that link in the description as well, we've also got the actual evidence with Companies House. So the idea being, one would watch that video and probably go like, holy crap, where is that evidence? Answer, the description, right? Like it's all, we've made it as simple as possible, but at the same time, you don't want to oversimplify things, because what you could if you want to, right? But what you don't want to overdo is you don't want to oversimplify things and then risk people under researching, right? So that if there's some pushback, which there very well could be, then they're like, oh crap, like I didn't research anything, and then Dan told me to go do this, and then everything is his fault, and
A disclaimer: Dan's not telling you to do anything.
No one is telling you to do anything, right? Like everything is free will and choice. And I think at the end of the third video, I actually say like evidence in the description, enjoy your research, right? But the facts of the matters, and then like we quote Rome Statute, Article 25, which is the criminal personal liability, and a few other criminal codes. The point being, if one doesn't do this, you become personally liable. That's it. Right.
Okay, so last quote that I want to look at is from H.L. Mencken. I don't actually have it here, but it is, the average man does not want to be free. They just want to be safe. And that seems to me to be a hurdle that we have to go through for most people in terms of restructuring the way they think about government and self-governance, and because they're within a structure that, you know, they're not being killed. It's like Yuri Bezmenov says, the ideological subversion is so deep that they will never acknowledge that there is this despotism until they're in a concentration camp and they get a kick in the behind and they are, you know, their family is being murdered. And so it goes that deep that that we'll never be able to. So the idea of getting out of this structure that goes to education, goes all the way back to education. Mm-hmm. Everything in the education system is structured to give kids and people the idea that you're working within a system, you're working with an authority over you, the teacher, you know. What do you guys think about this last quote? And Simon, do you have any thoughts on, well, we can wrap up, but do you have any thoughts on the other one with the judges and how we should not be looking to judges to be the final arbiters of constitutional matters and of matters in general?
I mean, I think it links back to like what Dan was saying. There's mindset. There's just mindset work to be done to move forward correctly. What is your mindset towards a judge? Is the idea of going and standing before a judge who's threatening you, does it make you feel small? You know, do you feel beneath that person? I mean, a lot of this is, I think, social engineering to make us feel small in the presence of this false authority. So the mindset work and the work that, how you see yourself within this system of systems, I think is really important. And so I think one of the main places in which legitimacy is given to these corrupt systems is that legitimacy that lives within you, like literally within your nervous system. If you feel small and, if you feel less than in the face of these forms of authority, then there's mindset work, there's inner work to be done in terms of how you see yourself on the earth in front of this, alleged authority, when you stand before this alleged authority. So I think that aspect of this, I look at a lot of what's going on right now as impetus for people to stand in their power in this way, to really in their nervous system feel sovereign and capable to stand correctly, as a free being. And that's really, really deep work. That's really deep work. And so the amount of work that is required in terms of, standing up against this, whatever your process battling the system ends up being, for some people, I know that it's just like you stand up and you change the status of your birth certificate, or you go through the social insurance number route, and it ends pretty quickly and they're there. For other people, it may end up being years of legal battles to really see it through. It's totally unique to the individual. But what I think is this common denominator is you have to use, this is a big theme for me in all the work that I do. The pressure of the war we're in has to be transmuted, right? The constant pressure of the psychological warfare, of all the operations being waged against us. You have to take the pressure of this war and turn it into potential. And that potential is meant to free you. And that's the kind of transmutation that I think is really important here. So I think when we're looking at that and we're looking at these, these quotes, I think that's what we're calling people to do. And one of the most important things, I think, in that framing is you have to take the steps that are appropriate and in alignment with where you're at in this process. It is entirely possible that you are not yet ready to totally take those steps. You have to know yourself and know when to, and that's all about inner authority to me. I'm raising my children with the principle of inner authority being primary to everything. My children should not be making decisions based on how they think dad would do it. In the end, the goal is for them to have absolute inner authority and know how to proceed correctly according to who they are as individuals, which is really antithetical to the conditioning that this system, breeds into children. So I think the way, it's like you said, Michael, a lot of this goes back to the education system. So of course, this homeschooling and unschooling movement that is blowing up right now, that occurring in tandem with parents exiting the system, declaring their sovereignty, stating that they understand the difference between the corporate entity that the state claims to have sovereignty over and themselves as a free, actual person in the world. That happening at the same time as this sort of homeschooling, unschooling revolution, we are seeing, I believe, I feel very hopeful about it. We're seeing the foundations for that parallel society and for the decentralization of power occurring on a massive, massive scale. So, I feel very hopeful about it. And, what I'd like to do really is go through this process myself in terms of my birth certificate and, the CRA and all that stuff. I think that's what I've been looking at for some time myself. It would be interesting to go through a lot of this myself and maybe document it together, talk about this together and reflect on what's occurring through my own process and share this with people. Because I think we need to be transparent about what this process is like while also giving this disclaimer of we're not telling you what to do. Watch out for your own conditioning. Recognize that your path to sovereignty is completely unique as you are as an individual. But I do think sharing this, being very transparent about here's what it looks like for me. Here's where the pitfalls have, arisen. And yeah, to me, I think that's probably the most inspiring thing. And so I'd like to, at some point, maybe move through this process, and create some transparency and some content about it.
Dan, do you have final thoughts on that idea of safety and freedom?
Yeah, it's a really good one. I will speak again as a martial artist in this one, right? Because of course the idea of safety and freedom are intrinsically tied to that. In the world of martial arts, one of the more famous karate masters, the man who created Shotokan karate, his name is Gichin Funakoshi Sensei. One of the things that he did was he wrote a book of the 21 principles of karate, and one of them was karate wa gi no tasuke, which is karate is on the side of justice. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but when you see people doing a pattern, they put their hands like this, and a lot of the time, and then they open up the pattern like that, and then they go and do their kata. But that symbol right there is quite literally like breaking the chains of emancipation. So freedom is built into the martial arts, which the Palladians gave to us thousands of years ago, or Plejarians if you're cool. But the point being, the idea of freedom and safety is something that has been with us as long as we've been around here, and the spiritual journey is one of freedom, right? Because in a test of spirituality, whether it's martial arts or yoga or Christianity or whatever, your faith is always tested by fire. That the concept of safety is something where if your goal is safety, you're going to be in a little bit of state of stagnation. Spiritual growth is an uncomfortable process.
Right, exactly.
And there is no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. So if our objective is safety, I sort of like this is the other thing. When you're not challenging things, we are still in a state of warfare. You're not actually safe. There's only the illusion of safety,
and the illusion
just not
of
being
freedom
bothered.
too.
If one wants the illusion of safety, why not just take the shot? Be a slave, right? Like you will quite literally not be bothered by this entity. You know what I mean? But in a very good way, so many folks have still not caved on that point. That means that there is a spark of hope there is, however big or small that flame is, it exists. It can be kindled. It can be nourished. I would say to anybody that is going through that process, allow yourself the ability to surprise yourself. You are so much more capable than you probably even realize. Everybody is capable of this. We are all here in this time, in this now moment, because we chose to be. And it's like there's a knock at the door. You don't have to answer, but you can if you choose. So safety is an illusion, right? If the goal is safety, no problem, right? Maybe you'll do a do-over in another life or whatever it might be, but that's where stagnation lives.
And so I'll end off on another aspect that we do have to take into consideration is there are people that do want to just be safe and are okay with subjugating themselves and want that, right? We can't impose this idea of liberty, of dangerous liberty onto people. And so there are people that want to be governed, that want to be in this system. An example actually is, but this has a lot to do with the indoctrination aspect. Slaves, once the Civil War ended, many of them were lost and wanted to stay slaves. This is something that is a conditioning thing, but I think ultimately be human to truly, be fulfilled as a human being. Liberty is such an important part of being that. But you don't necessarily want to, and that could have to do with your indoctrination or not. Anyways, Dan, thanks so much for coming on, man. We have plenty more talks to be had. I think we'll have different kinds of talks where we deep dive a little more, but also we can focus on certain things. So pleasure having you, man. Thanks for coming on.
And you know what we could potentially arrange, I'll suggest, is maybe we try to get in person in studio, since you may be coming this way, Michael, and Dan, you're only a car ride or a train ride away.
Mm-hmm.
I have access to free film studios here in Toronto. So, and a cinematographer and lots of cameras. So, maybe we do something bigger and, get some higher quality content on this. Cause I think that production value element is big. And I want more people to understand this and feel less anxious about it and less overwhelmed by the concepts being offered. Cause I know that's
it's so important because it's actionable. People have been asking, they've been asking since the beginning, what do we do? This is something you can do.
This is it.
So
it's important work what you're doing. So
thank you. And thank you guys for hosting this. Like really, it's the timing is quite divine. And as you said, people still come to me to this day. And when I have more one-on-one conversations with people that I've met in person, maybe taught some karate to, right, or whatever else it may be, and they come to me and they say like, okay, so I'm looking into this tax thing now, and da 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 da, and I give them all the information again, and they're like, and then they throw excuses as to why they haven't, which is fine, but then that when they poke me at it, I get a little frustrated. Let's say, right? And then they go, rather than getting mad at me, do this, like you got to be gentle with people, be gentle, be graceful, like give them the info, and that's when I go, like, we have been giving the info for 4 years. I make the websites, I put the content out there, I've held the rallies, like we've done all these things like at our own expense, at our own cost, with no donations. 0 donations ever, because with even when it was Hugs Over Masks and stuff, I was like, why are we selling? Why are you like what funds are we raising here? Where are they going? I'm not seeing any of them. What are we doing with this dollar? Are we, like we weren't producing content. We didn't have things that we needed to spend those resources on. You know what I mean? So everything that we've ever done has been free, no donation. Here's the info, whatever you want to do. But at the same time, that's sometimes the challenging part, right? Where people go, oh, it's up to me. So Simon, I kept on thinking throughout this about your what was the title of it? Was it Heart Math, or the thing you did on Edge of Wonder where it was all about the heart? I'm
Yes.
sure you remember that because you did it.
Yeah. Yeah. It
What
had
was
to
what was it
do
called?
with, um, oh, you mean the title of the episode?
I think it was a series. I think you did
Yeah. It was
like 4 or
metaphysical
5
activism.
episodes.
It was metaphysical activism. It was a whole season on inner awareness
Yeah,
and the role of the heart in inner awareness, how that relates to outer awareness. And I think the whole season was focused on what I called metaphysical activism.
right, right. So, the idea of like the heart actually having a frequency and that it emits a frequency and everything like that. In the world of martial arts, we talk about like the chakras and how things, interact and go about and the frequency that emits, right? But the whole idea of whatever kind of work people are doing as individuals, that once you hit that tone or that frequency or whatever you want to call it, it does emanate, right? And this is where it's so important, because this is on the other side of it. I think you've got a great idea with the content there, but I can tell you as well from personal experience, whether it's teaching this stuff, putting it out there, going to Dundas Square, doing speeches. Like when we first did the citizens arrest, there are videos of me saying like, "Hey, what'd you guys do this weekend?" It was like October 17th. There was like 8,000 people in Dundas Square, and I was like, "What'd you guys do this weekend?" Okay, cool. We did a citizens arrest of the mayor of Burlington, and it was like a WWE event. The crowd popped, and they were like, "Ah!" And then I was like, "And you could do it too." It was, and then we would get so many people saying, when are you going to come to Toronto to do this for us? And I would
Not
say,
how this works,
oh,
folks. Yeah.
well, we've got Rebecca from Stand for Thee. She lives in Toronto. Like we did Halton because that's where we live, right? We got Rebecca over there, and at the time there was a Vlad too. Like we've got them. We've given them the process. We show them how to do it, and they're like, and they would say to us, well, you guys are the experts. Like you think my sensei and I went around arresting mayors before 2020? Like we're new to this too. We just did the thing, right? So
Action.
so you,
Action.
you can show people, and you can also show people that you're doing it too. But that little extra step, especially 4 years into it, they've they really 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 have to take it on their own, right? Like I've taught
We've gone
kids how
back
to
into
defend
complacency.
themselves, and then they get their butt kicked in a sparring match. Older, more knowledgeable, stronger, all of those things. I've seen like an 8-year-old get the crap kicked out of him by a 5-year-old, because when it came down to it, the 8-year-old would not defend himself. And then when I asked my sensei, who's really the one that guided with all of this, um, at the times I was like, Sensei, I can't figure out what is it. And I've seen you take individuals like that, like as adults, as teenagers, and as kids. I've seen you take those students and turn them into like lean, mean fighting machines with a real sense of Zen and kindness as well. So I was like, what is it? And he said, at the end of the day, it's a question of self-worth. Some level, they do not feel like their life is worth defending. And I was like, yeah, okay. And with the kids, the answer is always with the parents. It's shitty, but it's like children are just mirrors, so they really just reflect like an insecurity or whatever that the parents have. And I'm like, well, Sensei, if the parents aren't training, how do I fix them? Like, how do I help this student? If it's an adult, help them, right? And what he said was so simple yet so profound. And he goes, the answer to discouragement is encouragement. Build them up, build them up, build them up. And it blew my mind. And then I applied it, and it works. It really, really, really works. It's so simple, but so powerful. So this is where, that message of, you've got that spark, you've got that kindling, you've got that flame, and
Light that
you know,
shit up.
Yeah. That's it, right? All we got to do is build them up and show them a way,
And
and
not
be
focus
the
on
way
the
showers.
technique, right? Yeah.
But then they got to want it.
Right, exactly. Dan, awesome. That's a good way to end it, I think. Let's keep in touch. And folks, if you've listened to this long, make sure to check out Dan. So Dan, on Instagram or anywhere, where do people find you?
You know what? The
website's best way.
Yeah, website's best way, tngalliance.com and lakeshore.sovereignassembly.com.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, guys. If anybody's been watching, Dan, thank you. Simon, see you soon. Talk soon.
All right.
You got it, guys. Have a great one.
Take care.